This is Boomer Time, a proactive podcast for baby boomers, about baby boomers, and for people taking care of baby boomers. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. I'm Nancy Kogar, an elder law attorney and aging advocate, and this podcast was made just for you. Remember, though, the things we discuss here are not intended to be legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established by this podcast. Caregiving is not an easy task, especially if you find yourself in the role of an unpaid caregiver of an aging parent that is not especially cooperative. That can make the role of caregiving even more stressful and difficult. Well, today we're going to talk about that on this episode of Boomer Time, dealing with uncooperative aging parents. First of all, please know right off that if this is you, you are not alone. In 2020, which was the last year this statistic was available, the government said that there were at least 43.5 million Americans in some type of unpaid caregiving role. So you know in 2024 that number has got to be even higher as the silver tsunami graying population grows. Well, today we're going to talk about threshold questions to ask yourself, things to never say to your older adult parents, and how to start the conversation about long-term planning. So caring for uncooperative parents can be over the top for some folks, and I will tell you right now, if you cannot manage it, get professional help. If you take on the role of a caregiver, unpaid or not, you are going to have to be totally vested in the background and well-being of this individual you are caring for. That means you're going to have to spend time getting to know their doctors, and there may be a lot of them, their medicines, the side effects, interactions, and their daily routines. This is a help because we're talking about serious issues here, which can range from annoying to exasperating to downright dangerous. So we are going to be talking about some of those helps that are available and the process itself, because this is not, as I say, one of those one and done events. Aging individuals decline, and that does not happen overnight. Today, you may see a decline, and that is when you have to start talking about planning. It's going to take time, and you need to be there for your parents. It starts with evaluating how serious the circumstance is. Your parents may be able to stay home with some additional support for years, which is always preferred, or maybe they just aren't safe to take care of themselves anymore and putting themselves at risk. That will require some action on your part as caregiver. Maybe you have a family that can share in the responsibilities, or maybe you don't. That's not unusual either. And stop gritting your teeth over that sibling that won't help. I've been there. Truth is that they probably have always been unhelpful or downright selfish, or maybe they just can't manage their own lives, so don't expect a different response from them. You probably don't want their help anyway. Go out and find help and support somewhere else, and there's help available. I'm going to include some of those resources on my website, nancykogar.com. So if you are in this role as caregiver, you need to buckle yourself in because most times it's a lengthy commitment. The average time is 4 to 5 years. So this new role has to include some self-care as well. Now, I want to share a bit of a disclaimer, really just common sense, but nonetheless of fundamental importance. And that is, people are complicated. They can also be difficult. And add on top of that, aging or a decline, cognitive diseases are complex, and that can drastically change someone's personality or just enhance it. Even a urinary tract infection can make an older person out of sorts and even delusional. Pain can absolutely impact mood, as can medicine or mismanaged medicine. This is all critical to be aware of when you're in these types of circumstances. And I talk to my caregiving clients about this a lot, and believe me, it can be challenging. So there are a couple of very important threshold questions I want you to keep in your focus and make part of your mindset in this role. So what could be behind or the source of this uncooperative behavior? And that may take some detective work. We'll talk about that in a bit. The other question, what am I doing? Or is there a manner in which I'm approaching the issue of my parents that's creating or aggravating so that may be causing them to be more uncooperative? And how can I approach these issues differently? Body language, tone, situational circumstances, being on the phone versus eyeball to eyeball, even the time of day, those can have an impact on how people respond. Third, is this person, your parent, whomever you're caring for, a danger to themselves or another person? Because here's a core reality. If you are a caregiver, then you have some degree of responsibility over the health, safety, and welfare of this person. And chances are they're entrusting you to be that for them as well. So let's talk about language. This is something I always talk to my clients about, and it can involve timing. Here are 8 things that you should never say to your older parents, and it may save you a lot of heartache. Language is important too, and that's something I talk with my clients about, and can be all in the timing. But I want to talk more about 8 things you should never say to your parents, and we'll tackle that when we come back after this break. Welcome back. Being more aware of the language you use is very important. Trust me, I've been there too. There are just some things that you should never really say. And the truth is, these things can come out of your mouth without even realizing it. The tongue is something we need to be very mindful of. It has the power to build up and destroy quickly, right? Well, with that in mind, and it's important to be mindful of these sensitive issues your parents may be going through, here are 8 things that you probably should never say to your older parents. 1, how come you can't remember that? Come on, people. Seniors often lose short-term memory before long-term, and forgetting all kinds of things, that can really put pressure on them, and they will react poorly to that. Heck, I walk into a room and can't remember what I went into the room for, right? 2, you could do that if you really tried. Simple tasks like tying your shoes can become almost impossible if you have arthritis or your back doesn't bend easily, and shaming them into that is not going to help. 3, I just showed you how to use that yesterday. I know, I don't care if it's the remote, a computer, cell phone, security device. Learning technology is tough for any adult, but gadgets with lots of buttons and options, those pose a special challenge for someone whose cognition or eyesight is failing. Even, some of us with nimble fingers can be stymied by those new devices. 4, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? One minute you and your dad are talking about summer vegetables, and the next he's off on a problem about the sprinkler system. What happened? Conversations with elderly parents can often go rogue, so to speak, either because they can't keep their mind on the thread, or they're just simply bored and want to change the subject. 5, you already told me that. And let me ask you, do you ever repeat yourself? We all say things more than once, but because elderly parents seem to do it all the time, sometimes we lose our patience with them. Try not to. 6, I want your silver tea set when you die. Or how about an advance on my inheritance? Wow. Unfortunately, I've heard this one before, and it is wrong on so many levels. I'm sure I don't have to tell you. Even worse, casually referencing someone's death and an inheritance, you're like a circling vulture. Boy, I would react badly to that myself. 7, wake up, or I thought you want to see this. Sometimes when you take people to movies or concerts and they're older, and the lights are down, they might rest their eyes or take a quick snooze. That's okay. You don't have to remind older people that they're asleep. 8, hello, your granddaughter's name is Abigail. Duh. Wow. How many times have you called your husband by your dog's name? Mixing up those kind of names can be a sign of cognitive impairment, or it's just a normal problem. It happens more with older people, but don't do that. Reframe, don't blame. That's what they say. A slip of the tongue can unleash a world of hurt and ill will. As exasperating as elderly parents can sometimes be, spouting off on them will only make them and you feel bad. So, all of that can make a senior feel disrespected, unwanted, cranky, and can make them uncooperative. Proper mindset and attitude and calm demeanor should be your framework for this discussion. So, these are the important things to think about. Mindset, mindset, mindset. Well, and when it comes to circumstances, I wanted to start with the extreme circumstance and work backwards, because if you're dealing with an extreme circumstance and is in danger of themselves or another, the choice is pretty clear and specific. I'm talking about a circumstance where there's been no planning in place and you've struggled along with this uncooperative parent for years. Now they are just not able to manage themselves. Maybe they took a tumble and seriously injured themselves or had another circumstance where it's just not safe to keep them in the home. This would be where your parents also don't have any estate planning in place. I've talked about that a lot. So no one has the actual authority to step in and make decisions for them moving forward. This is really bad. I've talked about that. And it's too late to try to get those documents in place at that point, because most often they don't have the requisite capacity to make those documents. So the option at this point is pretty clear. You are going to have to look at a potential conservatorship over that parent. That is not painless. In fact, it's very painful and expensive and involves the court and multiple lawyers. And the court will probably direct a court-appointed conservator to manage and make decisions for your parent moving forward. Want to find out more about that? Go back to the episode where my law partner Jody and Schaefer talk all about conservatorships. Tennessee is definitely graying, so having more and more of these conversations is definitely important. So how do you initiate or start a conversation with a parent at this stage? Your parents will likely be resistant to any sort of forced conversation about their care. You probably would be too. They're afraid. They don't want to lose their independence. Maybe they've lived in the same house for 60 years. Maybe a spouse or your other parent has recently died and they're adjusting to life without them after 60 plus years. This is scary stuff, and you need to be aware and empathetic to those emotions and likely that mindset. So that's a starting point. I think it's a good starting point. So if you have an opportunity to set the tone for the conversation about your parents' long-term or end-of-life care, you want to have that calm and compassion. It's not easy, but it can be done easier with the right preparation and strategy. So in that, there are 9 areas that you're going to need to look at. We start with helping with activities of daily living. We call those ADLs. That's what facilities look at to make sure that they're able to live independently or if they need assisted living, etc. So these are key daily life tasks, and they can include things like the ability to transport yourself, manage your finances, walk without assistance, get up out of bed, shopping, do home maintenance, and make your own meals. All those kinds of things are incorporated into that. 2, you're going to have to look at safety issues. This includes addressing issues such as financial vulnerability or even exploitation. That is huge, and older people are such a target. I've talked about that before too. Another safety issue is the danger of falling, driving concerns, all those kinds of things. You'll have to look at medical and health issues. Medical concerns obviously are fairly common in late life. That just makes sense. Many older adults have chronic conditions that require medication, monitoring, and other forms of ongoing management, including physical therapy, sometimes surgeries, sometimes ongoing MRIs, all those types of things. And you need to be aware of these conditions and wary of the new symptoms or health concerns that you may need to get evaluated. Legal and financial issues. Well, I've gone there a lot, right? Got to get that taken care of before they lose the capacity to manage their affairs. Housing issues. An older person's housing circumstance often affects their quality of life. That just makes sense. It can exacerbate safety concerns, and you've got to look at, too, the ability of others to provide assistance in that house or residence, wherever they are. 6, quality of life and helping your older parent thrive. So beyond, the basic needs, you really want to look at your older loved one's quality of life. Are they isolated? Are they home alone without any transportation or social engagement? You need to look at all those issues concerning social connectedness, purpose, dignity. Those are all very, very important. So planning ahead, that kind of relates to my legal issues, but planning ahead for future declines, emergencies, end-of-life care, doing it ahead of time will absolutely reduce later stress, hassles, and lots of times, lots of money. Managing relationships and family dynamics. I don't need to explain that, do I? And then there's self-care. It's chronically stressful, but you need to plan to take care of yourself as the caregiver. That's a long list. Like I said, it's going to take time. But these will be on the website, so you can go over those again. I'm going to take another quick break, and when I come back, we'll kind of wrap things up. Be right back. Welcome back. We've really done some mountain climbing today. This is challenging, but I have confidence you can do this with the right preparation. And, what helps with some of these tough conversations? A good cup of coffee. So I just wanted to tell you that, by the way, in June, I am going to have a drawing for Coffee on Me from Scooters. And I really hope that coffee will help to generate some good conversations between family members. So if you're interested, visit my website, nancykogar.com, and fill out the comment form. Tell me why you like the show. And you may get some good coffee on me. So, I also wanted to talk about just practical issues of how do you start a conversation? Timing is important. You can't just launch into something, especially when it's this sensitive. So again, it's all about relationship and checking in with people. And why don't you ask your parents questions? Ask them how they're doing. What was their day like? And I find those conversations are always better eyeball to eyeball rather than on the phone. And they may be irritated, but, tell them, hey, I care about you. What's going on? Can we plan some time together? As my mother mentioned on a recent episode, she's over there at an independent living facility with lots of older people, and a lot of them say the only thing they want to do is spend time with their family. So maybe say you want to spend some time together. That may lead to a good conversation. Tell them how you feel. Tell them you love them, that you care for them, and you want them to be safe. I'm sure all that's true. Be persistent. This is not something you are going to tackle in one conversation or one day. And avoid arguments. You do not want to get into a situation where you're in some kind of power struggle. That is just only going to result in a more difficult circumstance. And I've tried to help some of my clients out of those circumstances. You don't want to get there in the first place. This may seem like obvious, but avoid treating your parents like a child. Don't talk down to them. Don't treat them like a child. That is going to absolutely backfire. And that's all about tone. That's all about tone. So, like I said before, tone is so important. Stay calm. Breathe. Be supportive versus pushy. Set some boundaries. If your parents are demanding above and beyond what is possible for you, you need to make them understand in a loving way that you have limits. Okay? Don't feel guilty about that. You know, this has got to be worked out together. Involve them in the decision making. That helps with that previous comment that I mentioned. If possible, sometimes it's not possible, but if possible, make them part of the planning process. And most of all, ask for help. Ask for help from a professional and or from someone your parents trust, maybe their pastor, their doctor, their lawyer, or another family member. Because the reality is, your parents have probably always been independent and successful and proud of that success. So a decline can be downright scary. And, they often recognize that. So they're scared. And there's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear of losing their independence. These are real concerns. So if you want to find a starting place, I always say start with the most critical issues and involve your parents as much as possible so that they have an active role in their care if they can. Depending on the circumstance, your parents may have a final say too in what happens or doesn't happen. And you know what? You need to prepare yourself for that if that's the case. Because, unless it's a circumstance where their capacity is at issue and we're just otherwise dealing with pure stubbornness or reluctance to change the circumstances, you may just disagree with those decisions and it may just be timing. But guess what? A person in their right mind and competent and an adult has the right to make bad decisions. That's just the truth. So this is all going to require a factual or evidentiary investigation as to the extent of the circumstances involved with any kind of decline. That will mean professional assessments. How was their recent trip to the physician? Do they need to make an appointment so that you can go along with them? Is their medicine current? How can you help with medicine management? How's their mobility? How's their driving? Are they active during the day? Is there some depression possible? A physician can help with these issues, and that is why you want to become involved in those relationships with those doctors. Be a partner in the effort rather than an interferer. So it just kind of depends. You're going to have to examine those safety measures. Like I said, how do they get around the house? What can you put in place if you want to prevent some accidents? Keep a mind frame of what you can do now that will help you in the future. Think ahead. And can your parents engage in some kind of social activity? Maybe what about a book club or a volunteer effort, art classes, a walking club, maybe a Bible study? That kind of engagement is important. And remember, I know I've put this out there before, but remember to put in place some self-care for yourself as you begin the role as a caregiver. That is also important, critical. You need to think ahead for yourself. How can you put some things in place to preserve and nourish your own body, health, mind, and spirit? Because this can lead to real serious burnout. And then you're not good to anybody, including yourself. Investigate alternative housing. Know what your options are now. And plan for backup plans. If one thing doesn't work the way you thought, already have a plan B and maybe even a plan C. I've got some resources, of course, on my website. I always say that, but they are there, and that's the reason I want to be helpful. So that's the reason they're there. And, I can't overemphasize how hard this is and you need help along the way. I'm going to make some plans. I've already started looking into it to have some guests in the future that can share how they managed and struggled with this, share their stories. I think it'd be helpful to hear from them. They've been on the journey that you may find yourself on now. And from a legal standpoint, of course, I'm an attorney. So do not forget to include estate planning in that planning. I've seen too many people do that. You will be glad that you did. The journey is much more complicated without the right estate planning documents in place. And don't wait, because if they don't have the requisite capacity, they can't make those documents. And we already talked about that. That leaves an expensive and painful option of a conservatorship. So you want to avoid that. Well, this has been, like I said, I think a lot of mountain climbing today, right? And maybe not what you expected, but I think it's helpful. Let me know what you think, because I value those questions. But this is serious stuff, and you're going to be older one day too, I'm sure. So what you learn now may help you later. And being prepared always alleviates a lot of stress. And as I mentioned, you've got to have that support in place, and it not just a plan for planning's sake, but you need to have support, spiritual support, physical support. I am a firm believer in the power of prayer. So I believe that you're going to have to get connected with a body of believers and have that encouragement. And please pray about these things. It makes a difference. I was talking about the tongue before and saying that it was something we needed to be very mindful of. And of course, the Bible talks about that too. Author R. Kent Hughes even wrote that nations have risen and nations have fallen because of the tongue. That's a powerful thing, isn't it? Lives have been elevated and lives have been cast down by human speech, which comes from the tongue. Goodness has flowed like a sweet river from our mouths and also has the cesspool. So, boy, we can do all kinds of things. Let's try to do the good things. So we come recognizing the power of the tongue in our own lives and in the lives of family and all those we come in contact with. And I want to use my tongue to encourage you out there and help get those resources in your hands. So hopefully I'm doing that. And remember to check out my website, nancykogar.com. I mentioned that earlier, where you'll find more resources and information. And you can connect with me there. I've got a monthly newsletter. I hand select the articles in that newsletter. And I think these are things that older people, caregivers need to know about. So it's free. Go on my website and just say you want to be subscribed. I've got a mailing list too. And of course, you can see if you can win a cup of coffee. I'm looking forward to that. I want to hear those conversations that come out of that. So, if you like the podcast, do us a favor and like it. We're still on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google. So share it with a friend. Get more people on board. And I would sure appreciate it. So I'm going to say so long for now, but keep listening. And I'll see you next time on Boomer Time.